Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Rawalpindi, a high-level army huddle has reviewed recent developments in the Afghan peace process and the security situation along the border with Afghanistan. Chaired by Army Chief General Bajwa, the Corps Commanders Conference took notice of the recent cross-border attacks and regrouping of terrorists in Afghanistan. The forum said Pakistan has taken effective border control measures and hopes that Afghan soil will not be used against it. The meeting also discussed the latest situation along the LOC and reaffirmed Pakistan's support to regional peace and stability. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Washington won't allow international aid to rebuild impoverished Gaza to benefit Hamas. He was speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during a visit to West Jerusalem as part of his regional tour to bolster the Gaza truce. Hours before his arrival, Israeli forces killed a Palestinian as tensions simmer despite the ceasefire. The UN and the US have called on Mali's military to release the country's transitional leadership. In a joint statement, they strongly condemned the attempted coup that took place following a cabinet reshuffle. Security forces detained the president, prime minister and defense minister of the interim government on Monday. EU leaders have agreed on a set of sanctions against Belarus, including a ban on the use of the bloc's airspace. In a statement, diplomats called on the International Civil Aviation Organization to urgently probe the incident. Brussels also demanded the immediate release of a dissident journalist detained by Minsk after diverting a passenger plane. Daily COVID-19 infections in India have dipped under 200,000 for the first time in 40 days. The country also reported more than 3,500 deaths in the past 24 hours. Here in Pakistan, the virus has claimed 92 more lives and infected over 2,200 people overnight. Nationwide, the tally has risen to 20,400. Globally, there are 3.46 million fatalities and more than 167 million cases. And in the National Basketball Association, the Milwaukee Bucks beat Miami Heat 132-98 in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference first round series. The win gives Milwaukee a 2-0 lead in their best-of-7 series. Giannis Antetokounmpo led the charge for the Bucks, finishing with 31 points, 13 rebounds and 6 assists. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Rawalpindi, a high-level army huddle has reviewed recent developments in the Afghan peace process and the security situation along the border with Afghanistan. Chaired by Army Chief General Bajwa, the Corps Commanders Conference took notice of the recent cross-border attacks and regrouping of terrorists in Afghanistan. The forum said Pakistan has taken effective border control measures and hopes that Afghan soil will not be used against its territory. The meeting also discussed the latest situation along the LOC and reaffirmed Pakistan's support to regional peace and stability. The Army Chief also appreciated the military's support to civil administration in containing the ongoing third wave of COVID-19. Australia says it will close its embassy in Afghanistan on May the 28th due to security fears. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the move is in light of the international military withdrawal from Afghanistan. Morrison said the drawdown brings with it an increasingly uncertain security environment. He said the government has been advised that security arrangements could not be provided to support a diplomatic presence. The Australian Prime Minister said the embassy will reopen in Afghanistan when circumstances permit. The security situation remains highly volatile as Afghan forces and the Taliban continue to fight amid foreign withdrawal. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Washington won't allow international aid to rebuild impoverished Gaza to benefit Hamas. He was speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during a visit to West Jerusalem. Blinken's tour is aimed at bolstering the truce that was agreed in Gaza following the killing of nearly 250 Palestinians in 11 days of Israeli bombardment. Netanyahu warned that Israel will respond strongly if Hamas violated the truce. Hours before Blinken's arrival, Israeli forces killed another Palestinian as tensions simmer despite the ceasefire. 19 people were also arrested in the occupied West Bank. The UN and the US have called on Mali's military to release country's transitional leadership. Forces detained the President, Prime Minister and Defense Minister of the interim government on Monday. This comes after a cabinet reshuffle in which two members of a junta that seized power in August were replaced. In a joint statement, the UN, the African Union and the European Union said a delegation from the West African states will visit Bamako in order to resolve the attempted coup. The group said it rejects in advance any act imposed by coercion, including forced resignations. EU leaders have agreed on a set of sanctions against Belarus, including a ban on the use of the bloc's airspace. In a statement, diplomats called on the International Civil Aviation Organization to urgently probe the incident. Brussels also demanded the immediate release of a journalist detained by Minsk after diverting a passenger plane. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Minsk's move is a threat to civil aviation safety. Meanwhile, Latvia expelled Belarusian diplomats in a tit-for-tat move. The rift started after Latvia replaced Belarus's national flag with an opposition flag at an ice hockey tournament. India's daily COVID-19 cases have dipped under 200,000 for the first time in 40 days. The country reported more than 3,500 deaths over the past 24 hours. Globally, there are over 3.4 million fatalities and more than 167 million cases. More in this report.
Although India has seen relief in the numbers of daily infections, many issues remain. Experts warn that 140 million migrant workers are at risk of being left out of the vaccination program, despite being at high risks of illness. Analysts say the fatality rate in major cities is much higher than the national average. In Delhi, the deaths rate topped 2.54% in the first 3 weeks of May, compared to the national average, which stood at 1.14%. In the second wave of coronavirus, India's rural areas have been the worst affected.
The state government has deployed the healthcare in charge of the village to primary healthcare center of slightly bigger towns. There are neither nurses nor doctors here for months. The rule is that they have to come at least twice a week to the center, but they don't even come twice a year.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says about 39% of the American population is fully vaccinated against COVID-19. The situation in South America is not so promising. According to a survey, 1 in 5 Brazilian cities reported a shortage of vaccine doses last week. This too when the country's death toll is approaching 450,000. Over in Mexico, a large majority of the country is still waiting for the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Hundreds of teachers, parents, and students protested against the government plans to reopen schools in such a scenario.
Accelerate the vaccination program before there is a return to physical classes. We believe that given the conditions we are going through, the program is very slow. At this time, not even 20% of the population is vaccinated. And given the terrible conditions of the schools we attend, it's very hard to return to the classes.
Malta has become the first EU country to vaccinate up to 70% of the adult population with at least one jab. Meanwhile, in Asia, Taiwan has recorded 6 new deaths from COVID-19 for the second day in a row. Malaysia reported 61 deaths, its highest daily toll since the pandemic began. Sri Lanka has extended its ongoing travel ban for another 2 weeks as health experts warn of a possible breakdown of the country's health system.
In Pakistan, 92 people have lost their lives to coronavirus in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has risen to 20,000. They said the virus has infected over 2,200 people overnight. Officials say more than 905,000 people have been infected so far, of which 823,000 people have recovered. There are over 62,000 active cases in the country. More than 4,700 patients are in critical condition. Meanwhile, Pakistan has developed a COVID-19 vaccine with the help of Chinese experts. In a tweet, Special Assistant to Prime Minister on Health said the vaccine, named PARK-VAC, passed a rigorous testing. Pakistan has reaffirmed its support to the African nations for peace, progress and prosperity. In a statement on Africa Day, Foreign Office spokesperson said Islamabad is committed to forging stronger partnership with Africa in all spheres of cooperation. Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said Pakistan extends felicitations on the 58th anniversary of the African Union. He said Pakistan has been engaged in the peacekeeping process across the continent since the 1960s. China has slammed the United Kingdom for interfering in its internal matters under the guise of human rights. In a briefing, XINJIANG government officials condemned a UK Uyghur tribunal investigating claims of genocide. They said the tribunal is not a judicial body and has no legal basis for establishment. Officials added the so-called investigations and trials are merely being used to attack Xinjiang and smear China. 7 people have died following a toxic gas leakage at a food processing factory in China's Sichuan province. Authorities say a bamboo shoot factory in the city of Yibin was undergoing equipment maintenance. They say all 7 victims first slipped into coma and later died after medical treatment failed to revive them. Officials said another person who was hospitalized is in stable condition. They added an investigation into the incident is underway. In Peru, at least 14 people, including 2 children, have been killed by the Shining Path rebel group in a remote hamlet. This comes ahead of the country's presidential election on June the 6th. The military says pamphlets encouraging Peruvians not to vote were found at the site. In a statement, they termed the incident an act of genocide, saying the rebels call such attacks as a form of social cleansing. However, the statement assured Peruvians of a secure electoral process. The incident took place in a mountainous region where 75% of cocaine is produced in the South American country. In Myanmar, anti-coup activists continue their calls for democracy despite violent crackdowns and arbitrary arrests. In Maniva, locals marched on the Full Moon Day festival of Kasun in defiance of the military regime. A flash mob protest took place in Yangon, where the junta has imposed martial law. Witnesses say a bridge has been blown up in Hopin township of Kachin state, making the road inaccessible. Earlier, an American editor was detained in Yangon while boarding a flight to Malaysia. Danny Fenster's news organization says he has been transferred to Yangon's insane prison. An advocacy group says the military has killed 824 people since the coup. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Jeff Bezos has reclaimed his throne as the world's richest person after briefly losing his title to French fashion tycoon Bernard Arnault. More in this report.
The 2 men entered the weekend on level terms. Both were worth $186 billion. Shares in Arnault's luxury goods conglomerate, LVMH, rallied in the second half of last week. LVMH stock performed even better on Monday, closing nearly 1% higher. That boosted Arnault's fortune by $1.7 billion enough for him to briefly eclipse Bezos. However, Amazon's shares also ticked up more than 1% somewhere around midnight, making Bezos $2.4 billion richer than his short-term predecessor. As per business publisher Forbes, the Amazon CEO's net worth currently stands at $188.4 billion. Arnault has briefly ranked as the world's richest person several times in the past.
Brazilians obsessed with the renowned New York City Police Department have refurbished their vehicles to impersonate their idols. Details in this report.
Pedestrians may need a moment to get their bearings as they witness an NYPD motorcade passing in Brazil's biggest city. Behind the swirling red lights and blaring sirens are a group of Brazilian fans obsessed with one of the world's most recognizable police forces. Inspired by the TV cop shows like Law and Order, it's their hobby to refurbish NYPD cars and wear their uniform.
It really gets people's attention. Many associate it with movies. Some don't understand what this car is doing here.
Impersonating a police officer is a crime in Brazil and many other countries. However, the group says they are getting away with it as they are not impersonating the Brazilian police.
Sometimes there is confusion with the vehicles. People think it is a real vehicle that is patrolling the streets of Sao Paulo or is helping the local police in a specific operation.
Brazil has a history of crimes involving police impersonation, including a 2019 heist. Investigators say robbers used the federal police livery to enter an airport and steal $40 million worth of gold and other metals.
The EU says tensions with the UK stem from Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol. In a briefing, EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen said there is no alternative to the full and correct implementation of the protocol. Leyen said implementing the protocol is the only solution to ensure peace in Northern Ireland. She added that the mechanism is critical for protecting the integrity of the bloc's single market. The protocol, designed to protect the peace process by avoiding a hard border for Ireland. It has angered unionists by effectively creating a barrier between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This ties the region to a range of EU customs and regulatory rules. European stocks are making modest gains as easing inflation fears lift global market sentiment. Frankfurt's DAX is leading gains, adding close to 1%. The pan-European stock 600 has added nearly 0.5%. Italy's FTSE MIB and the CAC 40 in Paris have gained fractionally. London's FTSE is trading flat. Earlier, Asian markets ascended following overnight gains on Wall Street. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.